I'm Insomniac, and this is the Redshift 7 Exosphere. Okay, before I jump into this review, I'd like to give a big shout out to Jim Berry for sending this in. You've actually seen quite a few of his watches on this channel, so it's very cool that he keeps them coming, so I have interesting stuff to show you guys. Speaking of which, before I get into this review, if you have any watches that you would like to contribute to the channel, not contribute as in give to me, but contribute as in send in to be reviewed and then sent back to you, email me at shoulditimethis@gmail.com and I will tell you where to send them. Okay, let's get into the watch. The case on this watch is pretty nice. It actually has a really solid heft and feel to it. The finishing is a mix of brushed and polished. All of the finishing is pretty nice. I do like the curvature at the top of the lugs angling down toward the bracelet. That's a nice touch. The sides of the case are curved slightly for a good flow over the wrist. The case back is a brushed stainless steel screw down type with the company logo and some information about the watch engraved into it. The bezel on this watch is visually great and functionally terrible. Visually, the brushed stainless bezel with the minute indices and numerals deeply engraved into it looks fantastic, but it's a unidirectional rotating bezel with no grip whatsoever and a fairly tight click. I don't have oily or sweaty hands at all, and it's so hard to rotate this bezel that I'd never even use it. It's also functionally worthless because this watch, despite looking like a robust diver and having a screw down case back, only has a 50-meter water resistance, which in terms of realistic language means it's barely safe for swimming in, let alone diving, so you wouldn't be timing dives with it anyway. This needed to be a fixed bezel. Other than that, not a bad job with the case. The dial on this watch is clean, simple, casual, and overall very nice. Of course, if you were to read the company's description of this dial on their site, you'd scratch your head because they make it sound like a deep set dial and a cyclops on the crystal are new and revolutionary features that you can only find on this watch, but besides that, it's a nice dial overall. The center is a very lightly radial brushed black with a printed Redshift 7 logo under the 12 and a printed series name above the 6. The next section up from there is slightly angled and has a very subtle separation that makes it two round sections. At the outermost edge of the dial, you have an angled chapter ring, which is a mix of really cool and really ridiculous. The cool comes in with the breaks at every hour, where the design gives you the illusion of the chapter ring being broken by the well-polished applied hour markers. The ridiculous comes in with the printed track on that chapter ring. There's a 5th second track, but this is a quartz watch with a deadbeat seconds hand, so you can't measure 5th seconds with this movement, so why is it there? Not only is it a useless scale on this particular watch, but it clutters the printed minute indices to the extent that they went from would have been really easy to find to you have to look really close to see which minute index the minute hand is pointing to. Definitely a bad choice on this brand's behalf. There's a date window at 3 o'clock, but it's a black numeral on a white disc. It doesn't look bad being that the dial is black with white highlights, but it would have looked a lot cleaner if it were a white numeral on a black disc. And why is there a Cyclops magnifier on the crystal to enlarge the date rather than just using a date wheel with larger numerals? Your guess is as good as mine. Last, we have the hands. The hands on this watch are actually very nice. All three are polished. The second hand is a general stick style, but the hour and minute hands are a fairly unique shape that start off stick style from the stem, then branch out into fork style skeletonized hands for most of their length. The hands have lume filling, and the length of the hands is great for this dial. The only usable complication on this watch is the date. It works. It's pretty hard to screw that up, although I've never been a fan of using a magnifier on the crystal to enlarge the date. And in this particular case, I don't find that this crystal does a great job of magnifying the date from most angles without severe distortion. You really have to only look at it straight on in order to see the date well, which usually adds a complication to something as simple as looking at your wrist for the date. Not terrible, but a regular date window would have been simpler. The only lume on this watch appears to be at the ends of the hour and minute hands, despite the fact that the company website says, and quote, luminous hands, markers, and numbers. Besides the fact that it's hard to tell the time in the dark without any lumed reference to the hour indices, the lume in the hands is really weak. Even after a solid light charge, the lume is fairly dim and doesn't last very long. Time at a glance on this watch is almost excellent. The polished hands and hour markers contrast well against the black dial, and the white track on the outer edge contrasts well against the black dial. The hands are a great length. The problem comes in with what I discussed in the dial section. Their dumb decision to include a 5th second track between the minute markers makes the minute harder to find. So yes, you can tell the time pretty simply and easily on this watch, but if not for that 5th second track, it could have been perfect. Accuracy with this watch is a similar story to a lot of quartz watches that I review on this channel. It's a Japanese quartz movement, so it's wonderfully accurate, but points wind up being lost for the look of the movement. There's a bit of laziness to the movement and stop of the second hand, where sometimes it seems to travel further between some seconds than others, and the second hand only lines up with about half of the minute indices on the dial when it stops, so it is accurate, but it looks a bit sloppy. The bracelet on this watch is a standard 3-piece style with polished outer links and brushed inner links. It has a good thickness to it, and it looks great with the watch. I also like the fact that they went with a hidden push-button deployment clasp here to give the bracelet a fairly unbroken look at the bottom where it comes together. The problem is with the sizing. The watch doesn't fit me. You're probably thinking, well, add or remove links. Well, I tried that. I have a standard 7-inch wrist, and one link's difference with this particular bracelet makes it either uncomfortably tight or so loose that it drapes over the top part of my hand. So it either winds up somewhere down here or somewhere way up here. There are no fine adjusters to work with, and there are no smaller half-size links that you can remove. The very last links on the bracelet before the clasp are half-sized, but they're connected to the clasp with a narrow recess to hold the hinged mechanism in place, so you can't actually remove them. It's rare that I can't adjust a bracelet to fit my standard wrist size, but for me personally, this watch was literally unwearable. The company should definitely consider fine adjusters or half links in the future. And of course we have value. As of the time of this review, this watch is listed on both the Redshift 7 site and Amazon for $165. $165 really isn't a lot of money for a watch, and this one is aesthetically pleasing and feels well built. But in that price range, there are a ton of good looking quartz watches with much better water resistance ratings, much better bezels, even more complications for the same money. And for not too much more money than this, you can actually find quite a few mechanical watches with a similar aesthetic and much better attention to functional detail. So although it's definitely not a bad value at $165, it's certainly not a steal either. Alright, well, I'd like to give another big shout out to Jim Berry for sending this in. I've actually never even heard of this brand before this review, so it was pretty cool to see one of these come through here. I definitely enjoyed spending a little bit of time with it, despite the fact that because of the sizing issue, I didn't really get to wear it much. Either way, very cool. Thank you very much. If you'd like to see a lot more videos and you'd like to throw some support my way, there is a Patreon for Should I Time This. It is at the top of the video description down below. There are some cool rewards listed over there, so check that out, and I will see you all at the next one.